So I picked Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 5 through 10. See, just as my God has charged me, I now teach you statutes and ordinances for you to observe in the land that you are about to enter and occupy. You must observe them diligently, for this will show your wisdom and discernment to the peoples, who when they hear all these statutes will say, surely this is a great nation, it is a wise and discerning people. For what other great nation has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is wherever we call to him? And what other great nation has statutes and ordinances as just as this entire law that I am setting before you today? But take care and watch yourselves closely, so as neither to forget the things that your eyes have seen, nor to let them slip from your mind all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children. How you once stood before your God at Horeb, when God said to me, assemble the people for me, and I will let them hear my words, so that they may learn to fear me as long as they live on the earth, and they may teach their children to do so also. And then from James chapter 3 and chapter 4. Who is wise and understanding among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness born of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not be boastful and false to the truth. Such wisdom does not come from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, and devilish. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And a harvest of righteousness is shown in peace for those who make peace. Those conflicts and disputes among you, where do they come from? Do they not come from your cravings that are at war within you? You want something and do not have it. You commit murder, and you covet nothing and cannot obtain it. You engage in disputes and conflicts you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly, in order to spend what you get on your own pleasures. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. And then from Mark chapter 9, verses 30 to 37. They went on from there and passed through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, the Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And 3 days after being killed, he will rise again. But they did not understand what he was saying and was afraid to ask him. Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, What are you arguing about on the way? But they were silent. For on the way they had argued with one another, who was to be the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. Then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. This is the word of God. an essay that has been circulating the web this week from the Reverend Rob Dyer of Belleville, Illinois, in which he says, they are not coming back. It's kind of a scary title to us in the church because it's talking about our young people. He says that we used to tell ourselves that the young people would return after they graduated from high school. And they did not come back. And I said, well, they'll return after they get married. And they are not coming back. And he says, they'll return after they have children. And they are not coming back. And then he says, they'll return after the children are ready for confirmation. And they are ready for youth groups. And the kids are caught up in their activities and they are not coming back. Then he says they'll return after we have things put on the internet. And they are not coming back. Not a very hopeful vision, actually. And he finishes with saying, we have to get innovative. What does innovative mean, I'd ask Reverend Dyer. We have been getting innovative. We have been doing new missions. We have a movie we send out on the internet each week. And I would say that this movie, I'm glad to see some old friends watching it. I'm glad to see it being shared among people. But to put my sermons out on the internet, I think perhaps the most exciting thing we do with that is we reach our shut-ins. We're reaching people in the nursing homes. And I think that's innovative, and I think it's wonderful, but young people are not excited about it. You think of what they watch on YouTube as pastors' sermons, you're fooling yourself. They're watching cats. They're watching dogs. They're watching fun animals at the zoo. That's not going to bring them back to the church. Today's passages are about teaching the younger generation. They're about the direction the church has gone. We have people, the earliest disciples of Christ, the first 12, and they're arguing among themselves, who is the greatest? And Jesus says to them, it's this little child, Peter, John, James, Matthew, you're not the greatest. We've been asking that same question in the church. Last year at a council meeting, one of our association ministers from the Metropolitan Association of Chicago, he and I got into a slight discussion. Not a serious argument, but I said the center of power in our churches right now is the silent generation. And I don't fault them for the reason why they became the center of power. But I'd like to ask you if that's where we want the center of power to be. And Merrill, he's a good guy, says to me, well, what about the GI generation? And I said, I didn't respond to him. I didn't think it was the time to respond to him. But in my head, I was thinking, the GI generation, Merrill, they had their turn at the bat. They were the center of power 30, 40 years ago. But the GI generation, how many of them can you count in our churches, actively in our churches? Nobody here in this room fought during World War II. Didn't have a spouse that fought in World War II. We have a few people, and we're lucky to count them as our wise elders in this church. But you can count them on one hand. And it's so very typical of the silent generation that we say, oh, I'm not really a leader in the church. It was the GI generation, my parents, who were the leaders in the church. Is it where the money's at? The money, if you look at the money in the church, the money is with the baby boomers. The leadership in the church, if you want to count the pastors, is my generation, Generation X. But do we see very many of those people in the pews? The long-term growth of the church, we want to see the church growing, it's Generation Y, the millennials. That's where, if we want the stable part of the church to be, we're talking about the 30s, 40s-year-old, and 20-someths. Those are the people who can maintain the church for the next 50 years. They have the energy and the stability, but what has happened to them? Reverend Dyer says the trick is to get innovative. We've gotten innovative. We have built up the youth programs that are going to get their kids back into church. We're talking about starting our after-school program after a year of hiatus because of the pandemic. And I hope we see some kids being part of that youth program. I know I can teach them the Bible stories. I can teach them the Bible stories. And the scary thing is, they can memorize the Bible stories. But if we want to get innovative, they have to see it acted out in the church. That's the innovation I think we forgot. Somewhere along the way, we have gotten into power. We've got focused on power. We have started to say to one another, I am the greatest. And the silent generation did that by saying, look at the GI generation. And slowly they have gotten to the point where now they're the leadership of our church councils. They've been stable and dutiful over the generations. But they never were taught on how to be the leadership. The baby boomers, you are the hard workers, you are the ones who have some extra income. And now we have those rare exceptions. I'm the only person in this room from Generation X. Fact of the matter is, we're a rare exception. I will do everything I can to fight for the church. That's my promise to you. Try to serve you. But there's not a lot of us here. And then underneath that, pretty much falls away. And I hope maybe there's somebody on the who's watching behind that camera right now who falls into the younger generations. But you know when you look around to your friends, they don't need the church. They say there's no power in it. If I want to have power, I get involved someplace else. They say, I believe. It's not belief. Belief is not the cure to what ails the church. It's passing on this beloved institution that we believe in so much, we love so much, to the younger generations. We need to be mentoring these younger generations into being the leadership of the church. We're 3 generations behind that. 60 years behind that, depending on how you count it, 45 to 60 years. We need to be mentoring these younger people into being the leadership of the church. Innovation is not about technology. Innovation is teaching them how the church functions. And what is it about? It cannot be done by saying, the power is with me, I'm the greatest generation. It is not about saying, I will control the church the way I want it to look like. It's about handing the reins down. And the church needs to get caught up on that. Saying, what is the church going to mean to you? Generation Y, millennials. What is the church going to mean to you? It is about doing service in the way you recognize service. It's about letting them see how the church can have a mission. And I think the real trick to this is about being innovative in mission. Innovative in serving the world so that they can see what the church has done in prior generations and what it will mean for future generations. How are we going to reach out with gentleness, with love, with patience, with service? The temptation right now, the temptation is to gather back in on ourselves and say, we're going to take care of ourselves. The real secret to the future is serving future generations and helping them to learn about the community of Christ as it has always worked in our hearts. Amen.